when I was faced with that loan and having to pay it back,
Mm-hmm.
I said, right, how do we get revenue in the door?
Okay.
Um, and one thing, I do have a background in English. That was my degree.
Okay.
So I said, let's do a bit of copywriting. And that's kind of where the press releases came in and the music PR.
Luke is a violinist who became an entrepreneur to empower musicians through technology. His startup was a bookings platform for the music industry, seeking to help musicians deal with the negotiation, contact, and payments through an app that put musicians in the center. Luke's optimism and relaxed personality helped him overcome every challenge he faced. But there was one thing that made him shut down his app. Applaud was launched in March 2020, and after that month, no music bookings were happening anywhere in the world, putting him in a situation where he did not see any return on the investment from that app. Luckily, the situation pushed him to pivot and find a new business model to start generating revenue. Before his story, I want to acknowledge the people who are making this podcast possible. The amazing team that helps me make sure that everything looks and sounds good. Melina, Melanie, and Fernando from Prince Rose. Also, a big thank you to our Patreons that are supporting this project. Samim, Maria Inmaculada, Janetje, and Melanie. If you would like to join them, check our Patreon profile. You will find the links in our websites. Hey, I am Sam, your host, and this is Startup Fuck Ups. Hey Luke, how are you?
Hi, Samuel. Very good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being here, and I really admire the courage that it takes to actually be here and speak about the failure, because not many people has the ability to speak about it freely.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, you always hear about them being that overnight success, but it's usually behind years and years of failures. It's sometimes their second or third time at it, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely, definitely. So just let's jump in, and I know you are a violinist, a musician, and that you also manage an orchestra, but also an entrepreneur. But why don't you tell me more about you?
So I started playing violin when I was about four. My mom brought me to musician classes. I was doing it two, three times a week, um, which was really good, I suppose, because a lot of the people I was surrounded by seemed to be quite good at achieving things in their life. I don't know, was it that kind of musical education really stands to you in terms of your development as a person as well? Um, I was dabbling in a couple of orchestras, so I was learning how to meet and greet and talk to people and make friends. And I was an introvert, like I was a very introverted kid. I used to go to summer camps and stay in the bed reading my book every day.
Okay.
So it took a while for me to come out of my shell, but I suppose by my late teens, I kind of did. And yeah, that's kind of what set me on the journey with like the Trinity Orchestra in college, where um, I started to put myself forward a little bit more for leadership positions.
Hmm.
Eventually managed the orchestra, and that's where kind of the entrepreneurship thing came in, where I was dealing with all the bookings with big festival organizers like Electric Picnic, All Together Now, Metropolis, and the orchestra was in a bit of trouble financially. So what we needed to do was get as many bookings in the door as possible, because I wanted to be able to spoil, the members. I didn't want to be in a sinking ship. I need to be bailed out. So when I became president of the orchestra, that was kind of the key objective: get some revenue in the door,
Hmm.
um, build a relationship with the bookers, so that next year and the following years, there's never going to be an issue getting those really good opportunities for students every year. Um, so, as a musician, the main struggle was, how much do we charge? It's very hard to choose. There's 100 people in the orchestra,
Okay.
usually between 40 to 80, I'd say, on stage at any one time. So there's a lot of logistics involved there. Um, but we decided let's do it as best we can. So we started with a couple of £100 per gig.
Okay.
Um, Eventually rose to a couple of thousand per gig.
Nice.
started using a bit of common sense, which I think entrepreneurs need a lot of,
Yeah.
and break it down to the basics. How many people are on stage? How much are your expenses, van hire, all that kind of stuff? How much are you spending on advertising? And then how many tickets are you selling at the end of the day? So we were doing gigs in the National Concert Hall, sold that out. So that was, I think, nearly 900 seats,
Wow.
um, and nearly 20 quid a ticket. So you can do the quick maths on that and say, whoa, that's a lot of money that some of which the orchestra deserves, for
Yeah.
putting in all that effort. Um, so that's kind of where I was thinking about Applaud, and Applaud was going to be that bookings platform for the music industry, and something that gives musicians a bit of assurance that, yep, the money's there, it's being paid,
Okay.
and it's just transferred into the account.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, and it was in the days of Airbnb, so everyone was there going, "Oh, what's the next marketplace? If it works in the travel industry, why doesn't it work in other industries like music?"
Yeah, of course.
And you've got Uber and stuff as well, and in the other side of the travel industry with taxis and everything as well. So it was kind of this era of digitalization, I call it.
Definitely, definitely. And yeah, so tell me, yeah, because I've heard some of your interviews in the past, and many of the people ask you, so yeah, how does a musician become an entrepreneur, or how do you make that change? But to be honest, I believe that it's like a natural thing. I mean, I believe that the entrepreneurial journey and the musician's journey has some things in common. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think artists, especially independent artists, are the exact same as a startup. They're a tiny team, usually a sole entrepreneur, sometimes a four-piece band, and that's kind of the limit of a startup company. You don't want more than four marriages going on with different co-founders. But the key nugget there is artists are building a brand. They're pushing their product, which is their music, and they're looking for innovative ways to do that at scale without increasing their cost of goods too much, which is their marketing spend. Um, so if they can find ways of doing that, they'll do really, really well.
Yeah,
And anytime I had a coffee with a musician, the first thing they'd ask will be, how do I get my music featured in publications, radio, playlists, you name it?
of course.
And with Applaud, we were quite lucky. We'd worked with a PR company on the back of one of the entrepreneurship development programs we did in
Okay.
New Frontiers. And that was a government funded program. So we didn't have to pay for that PR company because I think a lot of startups can't afford proper PR.
Mhm.
And it's a couple of grand a month, which is way too expensive.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Oh, yeah.
100%. So what we ended up doing was reverse engineering that process.
Okay.
What goes into a press release? What files need to be sent? What contextual information and links as well need to go into a brilliant press release and a pitch? Because essentially that's all you're doing. You're pitching media outlets for coverage.
Yeah.
And eventually, after doing that process 40, 50 times with different clients,
Yeah.
you're able to automate it. You're able to build products and
Okay.
you're able to get to market much better.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So you can kind of compare the two. Applaud was a bookings platform with a 10% commission rate. Hours will be spent in haggling and negotiating bookings. You're probably getting 20 quid for your effort. Whereas Tune Release, you're getting probably 400 plus per campaign. And there's a lot less uh, work hours, man hours going into it if you're managing to automate the process somewhat.
Yeah.
And if you can make it self-service, fantastic.
Definitely, definitely. But I wanna know a lot more about what was the context in which Applaud was built, right? Because I understand that this was when you were managing an orchestra and you were seeing the bookings with this. But what was that thing that led you say, "Hey, yeah, this is obvious for me to actually move forward"? And what was the context at that moment? Tell me more about that.
So I was doing a couple of kind of weddings and corporate events as a violinist. We were charging, I'd say, about 600 to a grand per gig.
Hmm.
Um, the thing all my quartet members hated was doing the client negotiation, sales, getting paid, all that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then when we did a bit of research, there was over 22,000 weddings in Ireland every year.
Hmm.
UK be 10x that, US be 100x that. So the market was big and that was just weddings. And I got really excited just thinking about the figures and what's possible. And
Okay.
then the next step was musicians, for the most part, not all of them, but struggle with digital marketing. They don't know how to get in front of their prospective clients,
Okay.
the bookers. So the big thing there was, could I build a portfolio website? And I
Okay.
was there thinking, oh, I need an Airbnb web application. And the mentors in the few entrepreneurship programs I did at the start essentially were saying, look, that's going to cost you 20 to 50 grand to build. You don't have that money. I certainly don't have that money as a student. Um, so is there alternative ways of doing it? Because I was fixated on the idea of an app, a
Okay.
mobile app. That's the way things are going. But the first piece of advice I got was, don't build an app. It's a waste of money.
And wait,
Um,
and
you won't
and
know what works.
yeah, and how did you react to that? Because I mean, you were so fixated in developing an app, and there's people telling you that this is not the right way. How did you face that? What were you feeling?
Yeah, like the whole, even the brand name Applaud was an app. So I was a bit
Of course.
taken back, and I think you go back to the drawing board a little bit. But
Okay.
then reality sets in, and you're there going, when I look up mobile app developers and app building websites, there's not as many yet, which I think it's a growing market. But for the most part, you have the Squarespace, the Wix, the Webflow.
Yeah.
You have all these really brilliant no code website builders, but not mobile application builders per
Yeah.
se. Um, so when I set up the Squarespace website, I was able to launch for 20, 30 quid, you know,
For,
much easier. Manually build all the profiles, because that way you're talking to the customers. You're saying, what do you
yeah.
want to show on your profile? And that's your features. That's the
Right.
bottom line. And eventually you're asking then the bookers, what do you need to be displayed on the profiles? Do you need their technical requirements, their price per hour? And you get to the nitty gritty stuff, which isn't fun. Um, but that's your product roadmap, essentially. And that really, really helps, I think, at the start. So you have to do things that don't scale. You have to do everything manually, to talk to all your customers. Um, and you should enjoy it. If you don't have a passion for it, don't do it.
Now you've told me about the context. You were in this position where for you it was obvious. I mean, you have done the calculations, and you've seen how other marketplaces work. So why wouldn't it work for musicians? So for you, it's really obvious to do it, and you seek for help. You go to the entrepreneurial advisors, and entrepreneurial advisors are guiding you. But what was your plan? What was in your head, and what were you expecting to happen when you first started working on this?
I think every entrepreneur kind of thinks if they build something amazing, people will just come, and that
Okay.
doesn't really happen. So the way we started out was I would be on Facebook, see sponsor posts from musicians, go
Okay.
onto their page, and if they had a live music video that was decent, I'd pitch them. And that
Okay.
was kind of where I started learning sales a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit of templated text, personalize it a little bit, and you should get them over the line. And it really kind of honed in on what was our value proposition, and what did musicians want to hear. And once we kind of got good at that, we were able to get, I'd say, 50 people a week to join the platform.
Okay.
Um, it was still a manual process, uh, which then made me think, okay, I need developers. Who do I get on the team? How do we build this properly?
Okay.
Um, So I found a couple of co-founders through a couple of Meet Your Co-founder events. And I was literally jumping on anyone with a computer science degree going, please join the team. I've done the maths. I have a decent enough network in the space.
Okay.
And I think it will work. But none of them had built web applications before. I
Oh,
hadn't built a company before. So nothing was ever going to be perfect and rosy. So we got stuck in. We got onto an entrepreneurship program that paid us a weekly wage of like 300 a week,
okay.
and kind of like an intern thing, but to work on your own startup.
Hmm.
And did that over the summer months, and got to a stage where we were nearly ready to launch, but I had another year of college to do. And one of the other co-founders, Connor, had 2 years of college to do,
Okay.
and Brian and Gordon had graduated, so they needed to find jobs. So timing wise, it's very important to get the right co-founders that are on the same page, need it to work at the exact same time,
Yeah.
and don't leave too soon or can't commit until much later.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah, that's amazing. So what at that moment when you had everything planned and you start seeking for developers, what did success look like? What were you imagining your life would be if you reach success?
yeah, success kind of for Applaud would have been a place where musicians were saying, please use Applaud. It's the easiest way to book me. Payments are secure, and it goes automatically into my calendar.
Okay.
Um, we wanted it to be kind of, um, I think I've used the analogy of a cash register
Okay.
for musicians, where all the admin and the horrible stuff is done. Even their taxes could be calculated, because the music industry was quite a black economy, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and most economies are getting digitized at the moment. So um, I think it was really important that they embraced the digital side of where the world was going. And I think even clients really wanted a, a really clear set of T&Cs when they book a performer. Is there refunds if something goes pear-shaped? That kind of thing. So success would have been a place where we were doing 30, 40 bookings a week,
Okay.
and in a position to expand into the UK, the US, Germany, eventually Spain, you name it. Um, because it's a tried and tested kind of route to market, you know. Um, you get musicians that believe in it, and you're not charging them too big a commission,
Yeah.
because a lot of competing platforms are charging 20% commission.
Yeah.
Musicians are not going to give away a fifth of their income very easily. So I think a big thing is kind of making sure you talk to your customers and get realistic pricing done at the earliest stages, so you're not negatively impacting on your brand.
Definitely.
Um, when we figured out that bookers also don't want to pay extra,
Okay.
you kind of have to find a. That's where kind of the reality set in of how do you do this, because maybe they'll just try and bypass the platform, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
and there's big platforms in the likes of Germany and stuff,
Okay.
by Sony and stuff, that they charge a subscription. But the issue there is you might have hundreds, if not thousands, of musicians that are just not getting booked.
Okay.
And I would feel awful charging subscriptions to that many people who are not getting return investment.
Yeah. Definitely.
Um, so commission seems to be the way to go, but I think the way we wanted it to go was to add
Mm.
a small 10% service booking fee, like an Uber,
Okay.
that was very subtly done into the invoice that the booker would end up paying, so that the musician doesn't feel like you're dipping into their pocket for their hard work.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely makes sense. And yeah, so I really like this because I was also reviewing your website and I found out something that really resonated with me about you. You wanted to empower musicians through technology,
yeah,
and and I really find that amazing because well, I'm also a musician in a way. I am
okay,
not a professional musician, but I really enjoy music. I do love music a lot. So I truly and I'm also a software engineer, so I see how technology can help musicians, and definitely everything that you've said so at this moment I really like because musicians might not be good at marketing or might not be good at technology or might not be good at taxes or yeah and it's always like a black box a black economy as you said it because you get paid in cash and yeah things unless you go pro and then things are different, so providing a
yeah,
solution for them I also find it obvious at that moment. And I would
yeah.
also have taken your path. I would also have moved towards this being in your position. But then tell me when you started taking this path and when you started working towards this plan and towards achieving that success of reaching 40 to 50 bookings per musician, charging them on a basis of a commission that you are not um, uh, taking the money out of the bucket of the musicians, which is something that musicians I'm pretty sure that they would love. So what were the challenges that you found in that path and in that process?
The big challenge at the start was I was a non-technical founder, and I think people are very quick to label themselves as, oh, that's not my area, I can't do it.
Okay.
Um, so the biggest challenge I faced, which slowed me down, I'd say by a year or two even, was the fact that I limited myself and my ability to build.
Okay.
Um, if I'd done more research at the start, I would have found no code platforms, or I would have taken the time out of my day to get a 12 quid course on Udemy and learn Django, React, you name it. And
Yeah.
I would have got there eventually, because everyone can learn and has that ability. Um, so how I kind of solved that was I found bubble.io, which is a bootstrap company. It's by no means 100% perfect, but I think they're getting there. They're on the right path. And that enabled me to build MVPs, prototypes really, really quickly.
Okay.
Um, And that's kind of what led to Tune Release. I was able to, within the space of a couple of weeks, build a website, um, build a web application with in-depth functionality,
Hmm.
to trial and test different things out,
Okay.
which worked. Yeah. Um, and I think the world is going towards a place where independent creators and service providers are able to do business the way they want to do it,
Hmm.
which ties in with Applaud's mission to empower musicians, kind of to be able to do things independently. Because I think for decades, I'd say nearly a century, musicians have had to have proper management and someone who has access to the black book of contacts,
Yeah.
who knows how to do all the different deals in terms of sync deals for TV, and ad placements, and someone who can do all the bookings, and someone who can do all the digital marketing and e-commerce and merchandise and all that good stuff. So for a platform to be able to automate a lot of them processes, empower someone to do what a professional is meant to do,
Yeah.
gives them the freedom to experiment, find their market, and find their niche essentially. Because if you're facing, say, four different segments of what you want to be doing, so let's just take record sales,
Hmm.
bookings, PR, and marketing. You need four different individuals. Are you going to give them 20% each and then be left with 20% yourself for
Yeah.
your brand? No, you can't do that. So even at the early stages, if you're able to build and
Yeah.
iterate like a startup, they're very similar to startups. Um, they're able to get to a position where they're in a stronger negotiating position when they do decide, let's build a team, let's get some management on board. Um, they're very creative individuals usually. I think startup founders are very creative. I think we're all very optimistic as well. So I think there was a quote that kind of resonated with me:
Hmm.
the best entrepreneurs are short-term pessimists, long-term optimists.
Hmm.
Um, I do like that because yes, we can overestimate what we can do in a week, even in a day, and we can feel, oh, we're not as productive as we need to be. But if you look back on the year you've done, you can be amazed at what you've built, you
Yeah.
know, and like even ourselves, just finding what we've built in the last 2, 3 years,
Hmm.
um, that's incredible. Sometimes it takes 10 years to build products like that, you know. But
Definitely.
if you knuckle down, find different solutions, you'll get there eventually.
That's really great. That's really great. So now you're walking this path, and yeah, I mean, I think that that is one of the biggest challenges or the biggest constraints that many people, many founders put into themselves. The fact that they are not a technical founder. So the first thing is to seek for a technical co-founder because software development is expensive. So if you find a co-founder who wants to be in the project, he or she will not charge you to develop the project, and then oh yeah, that's really nice, but then reality hits.
Yeah.
And what happens when did reality hit? When did you had those type of moments that you said, well, yeah, I've been speaking with people, we working to develop this project, and definitely it doesn't make sense right now for me.
Yeah. A lot of mentors we had were really, really good. And I really appreciated that they were honest and open about things. I
Okay.
think sometimes when you're asking for advice, people are very quick to say what you want to hear,
Yeah.
just so you don't ask them again. But we had the likes of, say, Finn and Frontline Ventures, a VC. He's been there himself as a founder,
Hmm.
and he's seen what works, what doesn't work. And straight off the bat, you can say, look, your cost of goods are very high. They're essentially 90% of the revenue being processed for your website.
Okay.
How much is your cost of acquisition per booking? And
Hmm.
how many hours are you putting into negotiating each booking? Um, obviously the end goal would have been to automate it, and then with economies of scale, everything works out. But you can't say that at the start. You still need to be able to pay your staff and be able to have bread on the table every month. So unless I went ahead and raised a big VC round, but as a first-time founder with a very small team,
Hmm.
none of whom have proven to be able to build successful companies before,
Yeah.
that's a far-fetched dream. Now I've seen it happen. People have done it, and they've gone to Silicon Valley. They've raised massive rounds, but that's primarily in B2B enterprise software solutions that require a lot of IP and a lot of developers to do. Um, so I think the music tech space is a weird one in that there's not a lot of VCs that are too active in it, and those that are um, likely have a lot of portfolio companies that you're probably competing against. So there's that element of, are you first to market or not? And we certainly weren't. And the more market research we did, the more we found, oh, there's this brilliant company in the UK. Oh, there's this brilliant company in Germany. How are we going to compete when they've raised 1.5, 3 million,
Yeah.
whatnot? Um, but what we have found is those that persevere seem to beat a lot of the companies that raise money and burn out too quick.
Yeah.
Um, because we make the mistakes with 10, 20, 30 quid. We don't make it with 10 to 100 grand
Yeah.
And waste the investment. So the big thing then was go back to the drawing board and find a business that had higher profit margin to bootstrap,
Okay.
that had a quicker sales process, something where you can have a 10, 20-minute call, get them over the line, and that's your booking, and the invoice is paid, and that's that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with bookings, there's so much backwards and forwards with regards to logistics and changes in what people want and expectations. So that's where Tune Release came in. It both worked as a business, but also worked in terms of the same mission. It was still empowering musicians, but it was actually listening to musicians and what they wanted. Bookings were secondary. And then when COVID hit, bookings were bottom of the list,
Yeah.
you know? So that's where Tune Release kind of really worked and found its groove.
I would love to know about how did failure for Applaud look like at that moment.
Yeah, so we went through failure a couple of times, I'd say. With the first batch of co-founders, we built a web application that I wasn't confident enough in to launch.
Okay.
So that meant a full rewrite. I ended up having to get an entirely new team,
Wow.
build it from the beginning again. And that sets you back about 6 months to a year. Each time an entrepreneur has to do that, it really does. It's a knife in the heart, you know. All that hard work kind of going to waste, but it's not going to waste because you learn so much. Um, and I kind of think I was learning a lot as a product manager. How do you build a team? What Kanban methodologies do you use?
Mm-hmm.
What's a priority? What's not a priority? Um, and reading books like The Lean Startup and stuff does help.
Yeah.
Although they're recommended to everyone, so most entrepreneurs will read them. Um, and then kind of the second element of failure was we started getting into grant funding with the local enterprise offices. Ireland has a decent system, I suppose, for incentivizing entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And one of their programs was to give you half of your expenses back. So you
Okay.
would spend, say, 50 grand on investment,
Mm-hmm.
they give you 25 grand back.
Okay.
Now, ours was about half that program we went on.
Okay.
And but it incentivized me. Now you have to remember at this stage, I think I was a 22-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to spend 25 and a half grand that I don't have. Um, so the best way to get that finance was either to find an angel investor, of which it was a very risky early stage investment,
Yeah.
or get a bank loan. And there happened to be another startup kind of system set up where we could get a small bank loan of 15,000.
Okay. Okay.
Um, so now I had a loan and had to pay back a loan, uh, which is not easy when you're still in college. So we managed to spend another, I'd say, 15, 20 grand on development.
Okay.
We used most of the bank loan to pay developers for that.
Okay.
And so we had two primary developers that time. And now we had a mobile optimized, fully functional, beautiful, absolutely beautiful web application.
Okay.
And then COVID hits. So yeah, bookings weren't going to happen. I was never going to see any of that money again.
I think everyone got so much affected by it. Everyone's plans, everyone's strategies, everyone who invests a lot of money and time on startups and projects and initiatives, people who
Yeah,
open restaurants, people who open live events before COVID. The episode, there's one episode that I published a couple of weeks ago, and it's about a live event conference that happened the weekend before lockdown. So you can imagine,
oh yeah,
you can imagine her, her view on everything. And
yeah,
yeah, so I'm sorry that I'm laughing about it, but yeah, it's definitely really hard to face. And you're launching this bookings app, and then there's no booking. So
yeah.
how are you going to see that money back? How are you going to recover that investment? And that is, I
Yeah,
believe, one of the hardest things that you need to face and you need to swallow, because I have seen many people go through that, not because of COVID. I'm pretty sure COVID has uh, brought people down, but I have seen also people who invested a lot of money in software development and never saw a return on that investment, or also on marketing expenses or on product development, and never saw a return on the investment for different reasons. But that
yeah.
that blow really digs into you and really impacts you.
It does. Now, thankfully, I'm not the most stressful person. I somehow manage to take the blows and I keep smiling. But I think all entrepreneurs have to do that. They have to remain insanely, like, I mean, insanely positive. Um,
Yep.
there's not a sane bone in your body if you go into entrepreneurship. It's much easier to get a job in Facebook, Google, and get your ideally six figures at the end of the day
Yep.
per year. But when I was faced with that loan and having to pay it back,
Mm-hmm.
I said, right, how do we get revenue in the door?
Okay.
Um, and one thing, I do have a background in English. That was my degree.
Okay.
So I said, let's do a bit of copywriting. And that's kind of where the press releases came in and the music PR
Mm.
eventually. And we had a client base, like we had, I'd say, well over 300 musicians on Applaud
Okay.
as we were gearing up to launch the new web app.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of was great in terms of it was our initial market, our initial source of leads for the next business venture, which was June release. Um, and we started off doing campaigns for about 150 quid, really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I know there's consultants out there that charge that per hour, but we were putting weeks of work into 150 quid, and we enjoy it. You know, it's a passion project as well. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
um, so we were able to then over time improve our processes, get a bit of automation going,
Mm-hmm.
and get to the stage where we could charge nearly 500 a campaign.
Mm.
And
Okay.
then we're now ready with the no code app to launch that. And that's it scales with the client's budget. You know, it
Yeah.
charges dependent on how many submissions they want to make.
Yeah.
And it's really transparent. So it cuts out a lot of the backwards and forwards about, oh, did you email this person? Oh, did they open it? Did they engage with the press release?
Yeah.
Now we can say, just check your dashboard. And the open rates are there, the click throughs are there.
Okay.
And so we're nearly there. Really happy because now we're profitable, which is gas. We can pay back the loans comfortably. And for the first time ever, I'm able to pay myself, which
Oof.
I've never been able to do over the last 2.5, 3 years. Just showing you how long it takes when you're not smart and it's your first time doing it. You make so many mistakes, and paying yourself is an afterthought because I think entrepreneurs always think of the end goal. Uh, we'll get there eventually, and the payback will be brilliant once we get there. You know, um, so that's why I also think when you're hiring, you have to hire missionaries, not mercenaries. I know a lot of people say that as well.
Yeah.
Um, but you'll burn out extraordinarily quickly and your runway will go through, or your run rate will go through the roof if you're hiring people who are just like, where's my next paycheck?
Yeah.
Oh, you had a good month. Can you pay me a bit more this month? That's not going to work. You can't do that. You have to be in it together. And I think another thing we're working on now, so my day job, which have kept me afloat as well while we were bootstrapping,
Okay.
is to do with kind of policy. And at the moment, Ireland needs to improve kind of the employee share options pool,
Okay.
um, because we need to incentivize the missionary work. We need people to join the team
Okay.
that will get paid through equity at a later stage.
Okay.
And that lets you compete with the top multinational companies for talent.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, you're there going, Amazon's offered this tech developer 100 grand a year. I can only offer you 25. That's not going to happen. So you need the equity pool there just to incentivize first hires and whatnot.
Tell me a bit about when you face those challenges and when you face those mistakes and when you face those realities sinking in you. Um, how did you feel? How did your emotional state was affected by those things?
Yeah, like I'm a night owl, so I end up not getting much sleep.
Okay.
You kind of mull over the things and you get absorbed in endless to-do lists
Mm-hmm.
of, oh, I have to pay this back. Oh, I have to find a way of doing this. Um, Whereas I think get a bit of coffee in you in the morning, wake up, have a shower, splash the face, make sure you feel good, look good. Um, and you can go back to the drawing board and
Mm.
you can really prioritize. Um, so the first thing we did really was, okay, let's get a landing page. Let's post about it.
Okay.
But we weren't afraid to launch because the not launch was failure as well. Um, so we launched tune release, got revenue in the door, word of mouth started spreading, and the next stress then was, how do you deal with the amount of clients you're getting for the amount of hours you have to put in per client? And I remember scrolling through Twitter one day and I saw this startup's kind of, recommended tweet, and it
Mhm.
was essentially saying one of the biggest mistakes this founder did was um, staying as a services company for too long,
Okay.
because the sheer amount of time that gets absorbed dealing with the day-to-day operations of every little thing that goes right and wrong. Um, so that's where we kind of brought in and reprioritized and said, right, we need to essentially build the automated processes here, get everything going, and do things that do scale for once instead of not scale, as the recommended advice usually is. And I live by the rule that 20% of the work you put in is going to be 80% of the output. So 80% of what you're doing is probably a waste of time. And when you kind of put that into perspective, it helps. And kind of, yeah, another thing as well, when we had that loan taken out, when you have to pay back a loan, you're petrified of spending it. You do not want money going out of your account that may never come back.
Yeah.
So I'd have to question how good a loan can be for an early stage company, because you'd be so worried, especially if it's personally guaranteed, of paying it back.
Yeah.
Um, so I think a big feedback thing we're getting in Scale Ireland from a lot of entrepreneurs is they don't like personally guaranteed loans at the early stages.
Okay.
And it's a big deterrent to raising early stage finance,
Okay.
which is why angel investment is kind of needed, because it's the investor taking the risk.
And
Um, and if you flop, the company flops, and it's
yeah.
it's it's limited liability.
Okay. Okay. I understand. I understand. Yeah. And I mean, I've been there because I'm after raising capital from an investor and not
Yeah,
being able to give it back or to actually achieve our goals through that investment. Yeah, that's really stressful. Even though it was not a loan, it was from an angel investor, which of course took a lot of the weight out of the way.
yeah.
But then I started another company, and I'm actually currently in debt with the bank, and I have that pressure about paying that loan. So I really get that worry that many entrepreneurs get, and that you found that so moment, and that is really admiring to see how you were able to take that situation and just set it back, go to the board and prioritize that you needed to generate revenue, because I mean that is how you're going to pay not only the loan but also the salaries. How are you going to put food on on the table? So I mean that's really admirable, and I'm really interested and really curious to know uh, how was anyone else there supporting you to help you achieve that, or how did you manage to move towards that so quickly or so seamlessly?
So I've a supportive family. My dad has been great. He's actually really iconic in terms of startup fuck ups. Excuse my French.
Okay, okay.
Uh, so no, it wasn't a startup per se. It was a proper business, a services business. He set up a butcher shop because
Okay.
his trade was a butcher,
Uh-huh.
and then mad cow disease happened in Ireland,
Wow, okay, true.
flattened the business.
Ooh.
Then he set up. He began as a taxi man, and they deregulated the industry.
Okay.
So there was just a flood of new taxi men. So his earnings went from like nearly a grand a week down to 200.
Wow.
Um, and a lot of people lost money because taxi plates used to cost 70, 80 grand a
Yeah.
plate. And they were seen as like an investment, like gold. Let's just buy taxi plates, rent them out.
Yeah.
And then if we want to, we can sell them for the same price. But taxi plates, I think, went from about 70 grand down to 3,000. So that flattened a lot of people's like investments and
Yeah.
their pension. Um, I think he's a few other stories where he's done a lot of things in business that just didn't work out so well for him. But um, he has that get up and go attitude where nothing's going to knock him down, and he's always thinking of what's the next thing.
Hmm.
And I think just so my parents are separated, so
Okay.
I used to have long car journeys with my dad all the time, and
Hmm.
it's just like a, an endless like ideation think tank in the car. You're 2 hours in the car going from one house to the next, and
Okay.
you're just thinking, what's the next business idea? What's the next thing I can be doing?
Okay.
And that kind of got you in the right mindset. Like even when I was 16, you've little skill projects of, oh, set up a business and sell something to um, your peers, your classmates.
Yeah.
And he had a background in martial arts, so we got a load of martial arts equipment,
Okay.
bundled it into these gift sets,
Hmm.
and brilliant. You know, that's when you learn what's your costs, what's your profit margin, who are you selling it to. And that was a mistake because no one's going to spend 50 quid on martial arts equipment at 16. um,
I mean,
yeah,
in today's day age, I don't know. Perhaps you could
you
phrase,
would now, yeah.
yeah. Perhaps you could seek some Twitch streamers or some Instagrammers and
Yeah.
TikTokers, I believe. Then you could focus and perhaps you would be able to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really really interesting because that is one of the things that I have found in common so far in all the people that I have been interviewing is that they have a really emotional support around them that help them move through and actually face those challenges and face those hardships. The
Yeah.
other thing that the founders have told me is that they started taking care of themselves. They started meditating. They started doing exercises. They started eating much better because they understood that the founders needed to be in good health to actually be motivated and face the challenges that entrepreneurship put ahead them. So
I think a big thing I'm trying to incorporate more into my week is time to think. It's such a simple thing. And I used to have it all the time getting the bus into college. You have an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening,
mhm,
where you're listening to podcasts, you're reading Kindle books,
mhm,
and getting different perspectives and opening your eyes, I suppose, to the world. And sometimes the best um, times I've had in terms of thinking about startups and stuff has just been forgetting my headphones and having to look out the window of a bus for an hour.
yeah,
And you're surprised at what comes into your mind and how creative you can be when you're just spacing out.
yeah,
Um, it's vital. And in terms of support as well, my girlfriend has been with me the last 3 years, and if I ever need to vent, she's there. Um, Not that I'd be venting too much, but usually it's nice just to talk to someone um, who can empathize with you and is emotionally there for you, you know.
definitely,
Um,
definitely.
that really, really helps. And then diet wise, oh, like I think entrepreneurs need to have their 1,500 calories a day if they're losing weight. I need to lose weight. So they need to have a diet plan done out. And I think minimalist lifestyles seem to be where I'm trying to head. I'd love my wardrobe just to be the same t-shirt, same jeans. I wouldn't have to think. I wouldn't have to worry.
Mhm.
And I'd love all my food in Tupperware every day, ready for the week. Just take it out, put it in the microwave, and you're grand.
Okay.
Um, Very tempted to invest or not invest. Well, start looking after myself by ordering food from the healthy food companies and have your
Yeah.
set macros and nutrients laid out for you as well.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. That's great. So let's go back now to how the transition happened between Applaud and Tune Release, because I believe last time we spoke, you told me about you had some coffees with the musicians, and this led to the process. How tell me more about that transition to what are you currently doing?
So music is a very personal kind of industry. And if you go back to it, like most of the connections would have been made at a gig, at a festival, backstage, um, while you're doing the setup for the gig and doing the tech check and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so pre-COVID, I was lucky enough that I was able to go for pints, coffees, meet the musicians face to face, and have a candid chat. What do you need? What's not working for you? And what's your biggest problem? And the biggest problem by far was they're starting with nothing. They've no audience. They
Mm-hmm.
might have 200 friends that have liked their page, and that's all they're working with, you know. And that's not going to put bread on the table. That's not going to get them enough streams to be noticed or
Yeah.
kickstart the algorithm by any means.
Yeah.
So after doing a bit of research, then I quickly kind of scraped a couple of databases.
Okay.
I know that's probably not the most GDPR compliant thing to be doing, but I think if you look at a lot of startups, they have to do things that don't necessarily meet that operate in a gray area, that aren't too kosher. I call it. Um, so we had a really good database. Like, I mean, it was big compared to everyone else, and you have to laugh as well because I'm sure there's PR agents that have been thinking of it from the services aspect,
Mm-hmm.
doing everything by the book, and probably spent years building a similar database.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what they have is the rapport with the media outlets,
Yeah.
and you can't build that from nothing. It takes time,
Mm-hmm.
but managing to scrape a database together in 2 weeks just leapfrogs that process. So,
Okay.
can you, as an entrepreneur, think of, right, I shouldn't be inputting this data, the same data, just slightly different, 700, 800 times. That's going to take me weeks, weeks. Can I build something that scrapes it very quickly and gets it
Yeah.
done? And the answer is usually yes.
Okay.
So get a few free trials to some platforms and maybe copy and paste a bit of things, and then you'd be grand. So we did that, and one by one, then you do have to build a relationship a little bit, get buy-in from them, and not get sued. Because there's been a lot of startups in Ireland that have done enterprise sales, used the wrong logo,
Mm.
and they end up having to spend 200 per legal letter, um, fighting fire. And if you're spending 200 per legal letter, you're quickly going to use all your investment income or your actual revenue. Um, so yeah, don't do that. Make sure everything's compliant. But I think for your MVP and just to prove the concept,
Mm-hmm.
be as scrappy as you need to be.
Yeah.
Um, and a big thing we're trying to do now is not lose the 20 odd thousand we spent building Applaud.
Okay.
We want to salvage that in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best way to do that is, look, everything's mobile optimized. The stylistic guides are there.
Mm-hmm.
It's user friendly, and we have a lovely Django admin there for it.
Mm-hmm.
Can we build the functionality of Tune Release, which is a no-code platform that probably won't scale too well,
Okay.
but it'll prove the concept. Can we just incorporate that workflow into Applaud? And in terms of functionality, it's very similar.
Okay.
In Applaud, you post your booking, you see the musicians that apply, and you pick the ones that apply that you like, and you can book them and pay them online. Functionality with Tune Release is you see the media outlet, which is essentially the gig, and you apply to the media outlet, which is the booking. Now,
Okay.
instead of applying with a quote, you're applying with your single.
Yeah.
Um, the profiles are very similar, but instead of saying book the artist, it's going to be play the latest release
Yeah.
and download the files. And I think we'll very quickly be able to do it, but it's about finding the right talent. Um, and the best way to do that is to talk to other startups, because
True.
if you're talking to developers in big tech companies, they can't. The IP in their contracts are saying no. Any outside project you work on, we own, because we're paying you top dollar for for your work. So unless they're willing to do it very secretly on the side and not tell anyone, which could be a nightmare later on, um, try to get someone in the startup space who's willing to work for probably nothing at the start, um, who you can pay out of your growing revenues and scale with. Um, and just identify what you're really strong at and what you're really bad at. Um, for me, I can't code at the moment. It's going to be a while away before I can. So got a techie on board. Why not? So when we were starting and getting our first kind of client in the door for the bookings company,
Uh-huh.
Applaud, we got this massive college booking where we had to organize 40 acts that week.
Okay.
And I only got confirmation that the event was going ahead the Sunday. And I had to book full day of acts from Monday to Friday that week.
Okay.
So you can think of this scramble. But the joy as well, like this is the height of the startup. I've got my first proper client. I've got a couple of grand in revenue coming in the door. And so it's exciting, blood pumping and whatnot. But we managed to get the acts in.
Mm-hmm.
We invoiced the company. This was before we were VAT registered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we got paid, and we paid the performers. And then we realized, hang on, none of the performers had invoiced us in professional standardized format. So we
Okay.
were lacking so many details. So our accountant now 2.5 years later is making sure everything's perfect in case there ever is an audit. And we're going to have to just reformat all the invoices. So that's a headache. But then secondly, we registered for VAT at a later date, but we registered it for the date we actually started
Mm-hmm.
because we wanted to get the VAT back on all the expenses we'd paid for developers, equipment, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That meant we needed to charge VAT on the booking. So let's just say the booking was 5 grand.
Huh?
23% of that had to go to the taxman,
Yeah.
and we'd never even charged the client for that. And the client would have got it back because the client was a company, you
Yeah.
know? So it wouldn't have been a problem. But now I had to go back and pay 23% of that 5 grand to the taxman out of my own pocket because musicians had already been paid.
Yeah.
And our profit margin isn't even 23%. So we were making a loss.
How do you believe all of those experiences transform you? So tell me more about how was Look before everything started, when you started Applaud, and how those type of experiences transform you in what is Look today.
Yeah. So I'd say before everything was, oh, it's going to work out okay. It's going to be grand. Total optimist. Um, and if anything bad happened, oh, collateral damage, no worries. We'll learn from it and we'll move on.
Hmm.
But I think Luke nowadays is able to spot things just about before they happen.
Hmm.
So I'm able to say, okay, we're starting this new venture. Let's get a good accountant on board. And I don't mind paying them a lot of money just to make sure I sleep well at night.
Yeah.
You know, getting your operations nailed is really good.
Yeah.
And then secondly, going in with a plan. Like a lot of the time, you might book meetings with everyone and there'd be no agenda for each meeting. And you'd be there twiddling your thumbs in the meeting going, what's happening here? Whereas, let's give an example, Mark Williamson, who's ex Spotify, he's founder of Roster, brilliant music app out in LA.
Mm-hmm.
He has 10-minute meetings and it's in, out, gets everything done. And I was doing a job interview with him and I didn't get the job, but we're able to build this brilliant relationship and stay in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing there was 10-minute meetings are amazing. Like I had never been so productive in a meeting. He
Okay.
asked me, give me your pitch. Who are you? What do you do? What are you good at? And it just flowed. So I think being cutthroat almost with your time is essential to being healthy, not being burned out by Zoom fatigue and getting to the point much quicker. Um, Even things like I'm working with Martina Fitzgerald now, and she's 20 odd years experience with the likes of a state broadcaster RTE.
Okay.
And in the emails to journalists, it's not, hi there, I hope you are well. It's, hi, here's the news. Do you want it or not? You know what I mean? It's so much more to the point. Um, so instead of the lengthy kind regards, X, Y, and Z, hope you're well, all these little things, just be very clinical with your time, um,
Interesting. That's really interesting.
and then try and foresee any problems that might happen before they happen. And the best way of doing that is to get people who know what they're doing, who are experts at what they do on the team. So if you're getting an accountant, get a bloody good one. Don't get an accountant down the countryside who's used to dealing with farmers' annual returns. That's not going to help you in your tech startup. You want someone who can say, this is how much you're going to spend on research and development. We
Mm-hmm.
can probably get you this tax incentive on R&D.
Mm-hmm.
We want someone who can do your management accounts, who gets you set up on the right system like Xero or QuickBooks,
Yeah.
who can automate a lot of them processes. Um, and same goes for advisors. When I think for a young startup, um, we also and our mentors recommended getting a board. Like you need a few gray hairs. You need people who've been there, done that, are good at what they do, advising you. I've heard of some founders doing annual reviews of themselves. Like, what am I good at? What am I bad at? What have I done good this year? What do I need to improve on? Which is fantastic because I mean, at the end of the day, I think the hardest thing about building a startup is managing people. You know, you have to get very good at it, um, both in bringing them on board, making them have the positive attitude you need, believe in the mission, but also in conflict resolution, stakeholder management,
Yeah.
keeping everyone up to date on the same page, getting stuff done in a positive way. Um, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's their baby. they hate delegating, and
Yeah.
but I think once you delegate, you're so much freer in what you can do. You can start thinking 5, 10 years ahead instead of, oh, did we email this client about this thing? Oh, did we update this investor? Start thinking a bit more long term. Delegate them. Build templates. The biggest piece of advice I can give to an entrepreneur is build assets. And by assets, I mean anything that can be replicated and done again and again and again.
Yeah.
Um, because if you're doing social media marketing, if you've got your brand assets
Mm-hmm.
there, just pop in the new image and the new text.
Yeah.
Everything else is done. You don't
Yeah.
have to open Photoshop every single time, you know? And same with your accounts. It's going to be the top headings. What did you spend on marketing? What you spend on your cost of goods, sales, you name it. Um, and then when it comes to filling out applications, like say you're going for investment or grant funding or at the next accelerator, they
Mm-hmm.
all ask the same questions. So if you do an application once, why are you doing it again? You just need one template document with the standardized answers. What's your growth rate month on month? Who's on your team? Copy and paste it in, update it accordingly to the latest stuff, and you're grand.
Yeah.
So be smart with your time.
That's really important to actually prioritize the timing that you invest in the things, because I've read that many people say this. It's about that you can get $1 back or €1 back, but you cannot get a second back. So this really decide where you should invest your time and prioritize, and if you can make it efficient, as 10-minute meetings. To some people that might sound crazy, but in a certain perspective, that is really, really a good use of the time, in terms of if you're seeking to make a lot of meetings in the same time, which at some point I believe you might be able to face that. So yeah, definitely prioritizing the time, and actually getting an advisor, a mentor, or someone who will guide you. That is really important, because we even if you are an experienced entrepreneur who already have launched several startups, successful startups, you also need someone who has the other perspective to actually help you, and you will find someone who has more experience than you, or has some other type of knowledge that you don't have, and you need to have that input. I want to know more about where are you currently doing with tune release, because I know you're getting revenue to pay the loans. I know you want to improve the application, the Applaud application, to actually embed those functionalities in tune release to Applaud. But how does tune release look to you in the next 12 months?
Yeah, so in the next 12 months, we're looking to expand into the UK. We've already had clients in Scotland and a few inquiries from London as well.
Mm-hmm.
The great thing is our growth has been word of mouth. So I think there's an element of, as an entrepreneur, is something too hard. So with Applaud, every booking was a struggle. With
Mm-hmm.
Tune Release, we're actually like, oh, we can't deal with this many clients.
Okay.
Can we slow it down? And that's where we have to build in verification processes. We have to pick and choose who we're working with. And
Mm-hmm.
that also lends a bit of brand power and exclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
And exclusivity cannot be underrated. It's like saying you're oversubscribed on your investment round. Everyone's there going, but I want it in. I wanted to be in that, you know? Um, so it really helps you for your next step. So we have done a private beta where people are using the new platform. And
Mm-hmm.
the good thing is I'll send them a link, and you know it works when, without telling them or giving them a guide on how to do it, they do everything right
Mm-hmm.
and money appears in your account because they've bought something on the platform. And that's something I'd never experienced before. Um, so I think that all happened because I never stopped speaking to the user.
Mm-hmm.
I really broke down the product functionality to, you have to do X to do Y to equal Z.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally like, no, there's no bells and whistles. It's upload your profile, upload your song, send it to the media outlet after you buy credits.
Okay.
That's an equation.
Listening to all of the challenges that you've faced, and I'm pretty sure that everything that you had faced will help other founders to move forward. because it is exactly what I wanted to show. I want to show not only the successful stories that everyone hears about. Yeah, this startup raised 60 million in their Series A, and it's 200,000 billion valuation. But I want to show people about the other side of the coin, where you face those challenges, where you face those hardships, when you need to swallow a lot of, of water to actually understand what's going on, and to ask help for the people around you. And yeah, I think many founders need to face that with a mindset of understanding, yeah, I am going to face this, I am going to face this type of hardships, but they become the stepping stones to keep moving forward, and to building what you're doing. Because in the end, I do believe that if you are trying to empower musicians through technology, there's not one way to do it, there's not one
Loads.
application to do it.
Yeah.
You have several things, several ways to achieve that, and that
Yeah.
is what's really powerful about uh choosing your why, or why did you start to do it like that. Yeah, and I really enjoy it. Again, I really love the work that you're doing, and I hope to have another conversation about tune release, not on this podcast, or perhaps to not understand about the fuck ups, but also about the
Yeah.
success that you had. But yeah, I would love to have a conversation about the updates on tune release in the future. Pivoting is always encouraged in entrepreneurship, but in my experience, I have found that it's a really hard task to accomplish, especially if you have put a lot of work and effort into your initial approaches. As a founder, when you're pivoting, your job is to change the direction of the boat you're steering towards a new path. And depending on the circumstances, this change of path can generate a lot of friction and make it really hard to accomplish. I have seen some successful pivots and iterations of business models happen by a disruptive event that trigger founders to solve the disruption, forcing them to find a new way and steer their efforts towards a new path. That's why I encourage founders that they should pay attention to those disruptions in the early stages by testing their assumptions and validating their hypotheses. Luke was forced to pivot, and he did it really well by identifying his strengths and weaknesses to come up with a new perspective to still empower musicians through technology. Recently, I read a phrase that can help you overcome pivots easier. Fall in love with the problem and not with the solution. That way, you will have several paths to solve one problem, allowing you to pivot around the center and reducing the friction that this process generates. Thank you for watching. Our goal is to help founders see failure from a different perspective. If you like this episode, remember to like the video and let us know in the comments what have you learned from failure. Are you interested in learning more? You can check our Patreon for exclusive content and subscribe to our mailing list for weekly updates. You will find the links for that in the description of this video. Remember to subscribe to our channel to receive notifications when we publish new videos.